Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Hey, Paul. Hey, everyone.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Everybody, welcome to this edition of Lansing Marketing Hackers, our first one for 2021. And we have made it out of the I don't know what you want to call 2020, but we've made it out of that. I'm Paul Schmidt. I'm one of the founders of Lansing Marketing Hackers. I'm the owner and creative video strategist for Introduce Multimedia, and we're looking forward to today. I'm glad that you are all able to join us. And I know that I started the thing a little bit early, so we have about a minute worth of time as I hit the wrong button. The countdown was supposed to start, went right to the intro. So anyway. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to toss it to Julie because Julie's got some exciting news as well as talking about who she is, what she does, and all that stuff. Julie, go right ahead.
Paul. Thanks, Paul. You just were so excited to get this started. We have a great talk today from Seth. I know we're all looking forward to that. I'm Julie Holton. I'm also on the committee for Lansing Marketing Hackers. I'm the owner and principal strategist of M Connections Marketing Agency. And crazy enough, soon to be a TV show host. We, alongside several people that you see right now on your screen. So really, really excited. We just made the big announcement yesterday that Expert Connections, the Facebook Live series that we've been doing. You've seen Paul, you've seen others on this series throughout the entirety of the pandemic. Actually launched a year ago on March 15th. Well, this year on March 15th is our very first TV show. We're taking Expert Connections off of Facebook and putting it on TV here in the Lansing area. So you can check that out on the ABC station, WLAJ, every Monday morning at 9 a.m., immediately following Good Morning America. And on the show, we're going to have a Marketing Connections segment with our very own Paul Schmidt from Introduce Multimedia, Seth's team from Symposia Labs, and Seth will be speaking today. And of course, all of this is being done with WLNS and WLAJ, which is a part of, Chad's team. So we're really, really excited to bring Lansing Marketing Hackers to your TV screen. So really big news for us. Very exciting.
Yep. And I'm Chad Muntz. I'm with WLNS and WLAJ, and I'm going to make sure this thing goes off without a hitch. Trust me.
No pressure, Chad.
Yeah, exactly. It's better.
Make us look good on TV.
Bet. Well, yeah, I'm Chad Muntz. I'm the digital sales manager at the TV station, and we get into doing all kinds of online advertising. And I'm the person who kind of quarterbacks that whole arrangement there at the station. So we've been talking about hacking digital marketing now for about, I guess we're going on year 4 now, which is exciting. And I'm also one of the founding members with Paul. And it's really my pleasure. We've been working with Symposia Labs out of Grand Rapids. They're a sort of a kick-ass marketing firm. They're doing all the right things and staying ahead of the curve and really doing good things for their customers. And we always are thrilled to have. We've had the founder Timothy Haynes speak to this group quite a few times, and he's a fan favorite. And we're really honored to have the Chief Strategy Officer of Symposia, Seth Getz, come on today and able to share his insights as Chief Strategy Officer. We love to talk about digital marketing strategy in addition to all those little bits and bytes we can get geeky with. So without further ado, I'm going to let Seth tell you a little bit more about himself. So Seth?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chad. And it is a privilege to be here with you guys. It's a lot of fun. I've heard so many good things about this group, and so it's just great to be here with you guys. So with Symposia, we get to do a lot of things. We have a personal love of growth. That's both on our personal lives, that's both in our business, and we love to help other organizations grow. And so we love talking to them about what they're trying to do, what their objectives are, where they're trying to go. talk through their entire marketing plan and see if what we can implement as far as their digital marketing plan and how to do that. So we'll strategize with them, we'll consult with them through the process, and we'll implement it. So we have a lot of fun doing that stuff.
Well, awesome. Thank you once again for sponsoring this awesome talk of yourself. You just sponsored yourself. You did realize that, right? So just thought I'd throw that out there. Shameless plug now. It's a shameless plug. But anyway, I think without further ado, we're going to let you start your thing. And so I would like to ask everybody for a round of applause. However, we're not going to hear it. But anyway, oh, there we go. Chad with the snaps. Okay, good enough. But anyway, you ready to go, Seth? You ready to do this?
I'm ready.
Okay. All right. Well, take it away, and we'll talk to you for the Q&A section after you're done.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to talk about something that I absolutely love to do with clients, and that is to help them find, discover, and build out their niche. Now, I define a niche as the interesting intersection of a narrowly defined audience that has a specific problem and a message that both acknowledges and communicates a solution to that problem, and then a business that is designed to be awesome at solving that problem. Now, I'm going to be sharing a variety of examples from just various businesses, industries, and stuff like that. So just as you're going through this thing, take it in and say, what can I apply from this other industry into mine? Because one of the things I've realized is that innovation rarely comes from within the industry box. So see what you can take and steal from another idea or industry. And let me get started off here. One quick story to kind of set the stage for where we're going. I call this a tale of two chiropractors. And one of the questions I like to ask any clients is, who is your most probable customer? And I find it interesting as they answer that question, see what they come up with. Because I asked one chiropractor, I said, who is your most probable customer? He thought about it for a minute and said, well, someone with a spine. Okay, that's everybody except politicians. And what was interesting is that's where he came at it. He's like, anyone can benefit from what I'm doing. I can help anybody. Therefore, my target market is everybody. And yet the way this played out in his business was interesting because his entire marketing strategy was this extremely general message. He would scatter out to the wind images, advertisements of himself standing there smiling in his white lab coat. He wore a white lab coat because he heard it made him look more professional. And talking about, hey, if you've got any pain or if you need to know about chiropractic, come and see with me. He also always had that logo in every image of the spine. I don't know why chiropractors always put that image of the spine in there. I'm not sure what they think it gets them, but they always seem to put that in there. But his advertising was just put it out there everywhere that he could, just this general message of, hey, I'm here and I work on spines. He would do seminars, events, talking about the benefits of chiropractic care. He would sponsor the Little League. All okay things, but none of it was very specific. Talk to the second guy, second chiropractor, same business, same industry, same size of business. Asked him, who is your target market? He came back with the answer, I'm looking for someone between the ages of 25 and 45 who's been in an auto accident in the last 6 months and has insurance. And you can see the difference that would make, the specificity, there we go, get that word out, specificity that he had in that changed the way he did business because his messaging was so geared into that particular group, that particular, and their particular needs. And his messaging, I'll just paraphrase it down here, was basically the question, have you been in an auto accident? If you have been in an auto accident, you're probably suffering from these symptoms. These symptoms have these underlying conditions. If these underlying conditions are not dealt with, you're going to have these long-term problems. Again, I'm paraphrasing, shortened down, but basically went on to say, hey, we're experts at dealing with this particular condition, and we're experts at getting your insurance company to cover it. Now, that message, he put it out there. He put it out there to any group that he could see that sent to meet that demographic group, whether it be on Facebook, or actually one of the things that he did really good was he found out that all those accidents are actually in the public record. So he would have someone go down to the courthouse, find their addresses, and go good old direct mail, same messaging out to them to get them. What was interesting is that as they grew their business, the first one, he grew an okay business. He grew an okay practice. The average person that came into his business was worth around $800 to $1,000 in lifetime value to him. Because of the narrowly defined marketplace, the second one, as he brought someone in, he found that it was lifetime value was $6,000 to $9,000 from a client. And so that's the one part, is narrowly defining it. Then there is the messaging. His messaging was narrowly defining. But then you go on from there and say, okay, how do we design a business around this? Because it's not enough to just to have a target market and a good message for it. You've got to have a business that is designed to be awesome in that particular problem, to deal with that particular problem. You've got to design the business around it. So he went top to bottom in his business, everything. He said, what does this target market with these conditions, what do they need to see from me? What's their situation? When they walk into my business, what do they need? Everything revolved around trying to match that particular target market and having that niche market of working with those people. Now, he wouldn't turn away anyone who came in just off the street, but his marketing was all about that particular market and trying to fix it in there, because it's not trying to be efficient in marketing, is finding small areas and growing them and finding small opportunities and really exploiting the small opportunities. So, and by the way, interestingly enough, the second guy didn't stop with just one business. He developed this same concept in multiple cities around the country. And each time, because of the messaging, because of the target marketing, he was able to make a successful start of them. So it's amazing what you do when you get that one. But we all know, both in our own businesses and in our clients' businesses, that we need to have a certain niche, a certain target market, and messaging that works with that. But how do we go about finding them? How do we go about doing it? Because we're talking about a small, carefully managed marketplace where you set out to become the dominant presence in it. Somehow, preferably by science, by strategy, by demographics, by psychographics, whatever it takes, you have to shrink the size of your target market, of who you are going after, so that whatever resources you're able to commit to it, you can dominate it. You cannot dominate the group that says anyone with a spine. It just doesn't work. You've got to have a small market to be able to dominate it. So go after small, carefully selected target markets and do that. Now, we know this is the best way to do it. Here's the funny thing, though. We often don't do it. We don't do it in our own businesses, and we don't focus on this enough with our clients' businesses. Why? Because we don't actually take the time to sit down, to dig through the data, to decide exactly who is our target market. And because we have this passion for, we can help anyone who comes our way, and we want to. We want to help anyone that comes our way. So we have a rough idea of who we're looking for, but we don't actually lay it out for them and lay it out clearly. And we don't have the data. We often go by some gut feel. So let me go give you a couple ways of choosing a target market in the most efficient, scientific way. So the first way is to look back at your own history. And I find this interesting because we have this amazing amount of data in our own companies, in our own situation, that we do not utilize to its full capacity, because we feel like we have a good gut sense of what's going on. and yet we don't leverage our own data. And so the way I've laid this out, and this has worked really well with quite a few clients, is to put together a table or a grid. Now I want you to just kind of picture this real quick. Taking a grid where you've got down the left-hand side, you've got a list of your major product, service categories. What is it that you offer? What is it that you do? What problems do you solve? List them out down the left-hand side. Usually most businesses have got 3 to 6, somewhere in that range, where you break it down to those categories. That's down the left-hand side of the table. Across the top, list out the best way you know how to break them down, your various market segments. That can be based on your company. That can be based on the industry they're in, the type of business they are, the size of business they are, whatever it is, to break down who are those potential market segments that seem to resonate. So that's, you've got down the left-hand side, you've got your products. Across the top, you've got your different market segments. Now, for each time where those two intersect, what you want to do is you want to go back into history, take the last year, 2 years, doesn't matter. Go back and look at it and put in there, okay, for this product, for this market, how much revenue have I generated for my business in this time? How many clients do I have from this market segment during this period? What is my best estimates on the profit margin or the profitability of this particular product, service, and this particular market segment? What do I know about them in terms of how long they stick with me, how much hassle they are to work with, how well they pay, anything along those lines? What's the data points that makes a difference? And it's fascinating going through this with people, because as you do, they discover, they have what I call aha moments. And again, this is interesting because they're looking at their data. They're putting this stuff in there, and yet they have aha moments. They look at it and say, oh man, I didn't realize that. So I did this with one guy, and it was actually his business, this a few years ago, but his business was, he had an audio mastering, an audio recording studio. And so he would record commercials for people. He would do podcasts, different things like that. And as we laid this out, he had this one product that he didn't talk about that much, but it was a on-hold messaging system. So when you were put on hold, called a company, and they put you on hold, he would have recorded the commercial that goes on there that would promote the business and communicate the messages that they want out there. And as we looked at it, as we broke it down into his different market segments and his different products, this one stood out as being by far and away the most profitable. But it was a small segment. It wasn't very big, but it was very profitable and very consistent money. And he'd always said, if I can grow that one, I would like to. But he was trying to grow it. All of his efforts in growing it were at growing it with the small business community in his local area, trying to get these companies to put this program in place. And he was always struggling with it. But as we dug a little deeper into it, we found out, hey, there are 3 clients who have stuck with this client and who have loved this particular service. All 3 of them happen to be hospitals. So we dug a little deeper and said, what about this group? Are they good to work with? Oh, they are the easiest to work with. They pay on time? Oh yeah, completely. How did they find out about you? Well, I talked to one who talked to the other, who talked to the other, and they've been with me ever since. And it was just this, I just gotta let them kind of discover it. So I was like, so should I be going after hospitals and not this? I was like, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So he changed his marketing. He changed his marketing. Instead of trying to join the local chamber of commerce and market to this just general small businesses who could honestly use what he was offering, but they didn't understand it and they weren't ready to pay for it. Instead, he got out of his local area and started talking to every hospital in the area, every hospital in the country, and taking this program, same program out there. What it did is over the next 2.5 to 3 years, that particular product market that was so profitable grew to just over half of his business. And it allowed his company to go from mediocre profitability to dramatically, because he took a small area that he realized in his own data, this matches up. This works for me. I do awesome at this thing. I am a superstar in this region with this particular target market. And he pushed into that area and designed his entire business and his marketing message around that. So you take this product market grid, lay it out, take it as a grid and lay it out for your business. This takes a little while to do, but the aha moments are fascinating when you look at your own data and find out, who do I work the best with? Who absolutely is my most profitable area? Now there is a little bit of a quick and dirty method of doing this. It's not quite as scientific, but you'll get the point really quickly, and that is using the old 80 to 20 rule. 80-20 rule in so many businesses is that 80% of the profits in your business come from around 20% of your client base. I've seen this happen over and over again. Now, I'm not talking revenue. Revenue is not the same. It's 80% of the profit in your business comes from around 20% of your clients. The question is, who exactly are those 20%? Take a good look at your own data. Who are those 20%? What do they have in common? What commonalities in their problems, in their industry, in their whatever that brought them to your business and make them such a great customer? By the way, there is also an inverse of that 80-20 rule that I find fascinating. And that is that roughly 80% of the hassle in your business comes from around 20% of your clients. They are the life suckers because they suck the life right out of you. They suck energy out of your business and keep you from doing anything else. What's fascinating is almost all the time, those two 20%, that the 20% that is most profitable and the 20% that is the most hassle are not overlapping. They're two opposite ends of the spectrum, which, by the way, just a small thing. If you fire some of those bottom 20%, it tends to fill in up at the top. It's a gutsy move, but it works out. So give it a try sometime. So that's the product market grid, which is a very good way of looking at actual data of your own past history and saying, what can I do? Who is my best target market? Where is my best niche for my business? Okay, so second place to do is what I call opportunity gap exploitation. Okay, it's where you look at what your competitors are doing. Look at what they're doing poorly. Look at what they're not doing at all. And focus your business around that. It's trying to find who is not being talked to here, who's not being treated well, who is being preyed on by companies, and championing that situation, championing those companies, finding the opportunity and saying, we're going to be exceptional in the area. I worked with this one remodeling company. And as we're talking this through, I had just seen a list called the top 10 frustrations with the construction industry and the remodeling industry. And so I shared it with them. I said, here is what the public is saying about what they hate about your industry. And they looked at that and they realized, of course, they were making some of those mistakes, yes. But there was two areas where they did really well and that they got compliments from clients. And then there was another one that they said, this one matches up so much to us and so much to our values that we need to be awesome at this area. They made a commitment right then and there that they were going to take those 3 items. And those 3 items, the complaints that people had about their industry, those 3 items were going to be the foundational cornerstones of their service, customer service policies. The way they dealt with the customer, they were going to be awesome at those 3 things. Not just acceptable. They said we're going to do our very best to be acceptable at all these other 7. We're going to try to be better than average, of course. But these 3, we're going to be so epically awesome that people are going to talk about it. And that's exactly what happened, is that they would get, one of those things was when they come into my house, they always leave it a mess. They had a testimonial from one person who said, I think that you guys spend more time with a vacuum cleaner than you do with your tools because it's always clean. Those messages matched up. So they would go out, and that was their messaging, is we handle these things, and this is what we value, and this is how we handle things. And when that matched up to a target market, to a person, that would become a client for them. So it's finding out what you can do. What's the opportunity gap in there? Again, who's not being talked to? Who's not being serviced well? What is it that your competition is not doing or doing poorly? In today's market, just being good enough isn't really good enough. You've got to do something that is exceptional, something that is unusual. Just being good enough is not going to get the word out about you. There's a disease out there called just being like everybody else. And this greatly affects all of us because we all try to just live up to a standard that we think we're supposed to meet up to. We'd look to our competition and say we've got to be like them. We've got to use that model. We've got to do what the industry has been doing. We've got to do the best practice. Pretty soon, everyone looks pretty much about the same. And there's no distinction there. I think sometimes we're given this disease at a young age in kindergarten where we're told to just kind of conform, to line up, to go along with it, to fit in, to color in the lines. It's safer. You avoid criticism. But it's worth noting you're never ever going to do much with it. There's no significant innovation that comes from doing it that way. You can't be successful by avoiding failure. You sometimes have to fail your way to success. You have to go outside the lines of your profession, go outside the lines of what is maybe normal, and find that specific thing, that specific opportunity that matches up to a target market that you can use in your business. I don't know who said this, but I've always liked the statement. Someone said, if you can't find a good role model to follow, then figure out what everyone else is doing and do the opposite. Find that opportunity, find that gap in your industry, in your services. So you can do it by looking at your own data. You can look at it by finding what's the marketplace say. What opportunities are there in the marketplace that are not being used? Let me go back to the third way. The third way is a little less scientific, and yet it's still very valuable. And that's what I call values-based. Find a niche that matches up with your values as a person, with your values as an organization. Who do you want to do business with? Or actually, there's a better way to say this. Who don't you want to do business with? Life is way too short to work with people that you don't want to do business with. Remember I told you about that 20% that cause 80% of the hassles in your business, the life suckers? They're the people quite often that do not match up to your values and the values of your business. And so somehow setting up your business where those particular people either show themselves for who they are or self-select out is really very valuable. Having that in there. I think back on Ben & Jerry's ice cream. So I grew up in the state of Vermont, which is where Ben & Jerry's comes from. And it's interesting, their story. Ben & Jerry's has always had this image of being the anti-big conglomerate. They don't do things the way everyone else does. They don't do the way big businesses do. And one of the fascinating things about them is that even as they have grown into a large company, they're one of the few who have maintained that same value system that they had when they were really small. But you go back and look at the history of them and their story, and as they were getting going, they would go around talking to that small independent grocery store that we used to see back in the 70s and 80s when they were getting going. They would go around talking to them, and sure, they'd bring along some ice cream, but what their conversation was about is their values. And they would talk about what they valued and how they valued local and how they valued the small and the scrappy and everything. And it was fascinating because their customers, the stores, loved it. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them loved it and were so bought in by these values that even as Ben & Jerry's struggled with production and had inconsistent deliveries and even inconsistent qualities, these customers gave them an amazing amount of grace because of their values. So finding that values, finding out who you want to work with. I think I remember a conversation I had with Paul Schmidt here, who's on the meeting here, and he was talking about what he does. And I think he made the statement that stuck with me. He said, because Paul works telling a story of awesome nonprofit organizations. And he just has a real skill at this, drawing out from them and helping them to broadcast that message out there and tell a story. And he said, I want to tell the good guy's story. That's part of his values. That's part of what matches up for him. And therefore, that affects his target market, that affects his messaging, that affects who self-selects in to work with him and who he decides to work with. So 3 ways of kind of figuring out who your target market. You've got to choose at least one of these. At least one of these, and take the time, sit down, write it out. Product market grid, write it out. Take the data. Opportunity gap exploitation. Start looking at the competition, the landscape out there. Figure out which one you're going to go after, how you're going to do it. Values. What are your values? We all have a vague idea what they are, but what actually are they, and how do you talk about them? Some people have a statement, well, we value these things, but how much do you talk about them with the marketplace? How much does the marketplace know what those values are, besides if they look on the About Us section of your website? They need to know what it is that you value and how you value it. So those 3. But then once you get that target market, the next thing is messaging. Messaging. What is it that this particular target market needs to hear? You've heard the phrase that if you try to appeal to everybody, you appeal to no one. When you try to take a small group, what you're doing is you're looking at it and saying, what specific needs does this particular target market have? How can I work with that particular target market? How can I meet the needs of that particular one? If you can't tell me what keeps your target market awake at night, staring up at the ceiling, stomach tied up in knots, if you can't tell me what causes that, you don't understand your target market. Because something is. They have a problem. They've got a conversation already going on inside their head. You've got to tap into that conversation. You've got to be the person who provides the solution to that problem. But you've got to know what it is and trying to figure out what is it that's going on inside there. What is it that they want? It's not about what you have. It's not what you're offering. It's about what they want. I talked to this one person and she had a very interesting business. She had a very narrow marketplace. She ran seminars teaching recruiters for the financial industry how to recruit more people into their companies or organizations. She would go around and have these seminars and workshops around the country. And so she'd promote that, and that was her business. We got to talking about, why do they come? What is it that they really want? Because it makes sense that they would want to do better and do this, but there's something else going on. And as we talked about it, she related this story that she was one time at the conclusion of one of her workshops, ended just before noon. She went to get a bite to eat. She happened to be sitting at the table right next to 4 guys that were at her seminar. They didn't notice her. She had her back to them. They didn't notice her, but she recognized them. And she was sitting alone, so she overheard their entire conversation. So I was like, well, what did they talk about? Because they were just in her seminar. They just went through the whole thing. What did they see? What did they say about it? She's like, they didn't talk about it at all. They talked about golf. They talked about where they're going to go play golf that afternoon. They talked about other courses they played. They talked about the new driver. They just talked about golf. That was the entire conversation. And she was so disappointed. She's like, here they just went to the seminar. They didn't have any interest in talking about it. It's like, well, okay, but this is what's going on inside their mind. How can you possibly use this? She's like, I don't know. Now, you got to realize she had zero interest in golf. Zero, nothing. Okay? But as we had talked about, she decided to change her message. She started talking about in her marketing for her next seminars that basically giving the message of, wouldn't you rather, instead of trying to prospect by calling people and by going through all this hard work of reaching out and touching people, wouldn't you rather be closing deals and making relationships on the links? Come to figure out how to put that program of bringing people into your pipeline on autopilot so that you can just foster the relationship and go play golf with them and bring them on. The messaging worked. It boosted her response rate dramatically. She went a step further than that. She took it and made sure that her seminars always ended at noon and that there was another event afterwards at the golf course. Again, she didn't care about golf, but she's like, let's play into this thing. Let's work with the messaging that's already going on inside their head. She went a step further. When people would inquire about coming to it and ask for information, she would send them a packet of information about the seminar. Yes. She would include, wherever the seminar was, information about the golf courses in the area. Because she knew this is what was going on, and she realized how much people wanted to do this. It wasn't something that matched up to her, but it was her tying into, what is my target market and what are they thinking about? Now, that wasn't so much of what was keeping them awake at night, but it was what their passion was. So finding out what that message is, what is it that target market is talking about? What is it that they want to do? So when you do this, when you go through this, finding it, messaging, then you've got to design your business around it, because it's not enough. It's not enough just to have a carefully selected target market and then have a messaging that's compelling for that target market. You've got to design the rest of your business to be absolutely epically awesome at solving what it is that they're trying to do. Once you've done that, once you've gone through those 3 things, you now have a niche for your business, and you've got something that should be very profitable for your business for a while to come. So with that, I'd like to throw it open for any discussion or questions. I really enjoyed talking about you guys and hope that it works well for you. If you guys have any more questions or comments, feel free to shoot me an email. But yeah, let's bring this open for some questions here if we could.
We do have one question right off the bat. First of all, Seth, that was phenomenal. I have so many things that I would love to dive into further with you, but we're going to start with the question in the chat box here. Kiana has asked, how do you narrow down your target market without sounding biased against others who could potentially shop with you?
First of all, let me go back to the chiropractor example. Remember his narrow target market? When people showed up at his office, he didn't turn them away. In fact, it was a secondary thing that he realized that once he had a while with somebody, he was very high probability of getting their friends and family coming in because of the great experience. So he would accept that, but his entire effort, every single effort that he had was going after this particular target market. And so it's trying to allow them to see, is this really a good fit for me? And most of the time they can actually self-select out.
Yeah, which makes sense, right? Because you're not saying that you're going to turn people away or using language, in your marketing that is going to just so narrowly focus it. But really, you need to have those goals set so you know what type of client you're looking to attract. Yeah, really interesting. Chad, Paul, any questions?
Well, I just want to talk a little bit more about that, because that's one of the biggest mistakes advertisers can make is to say, well, anyone with a spine, right? That's my potential audience. But Seth's point is like, focus on the most profitable type of customer. The other people will see it. You're not excluding them, but you're focusing your marketing, your dollars, your messaging, all of that effort to that ideal customer that has the potential to spend the most and be the most profitable. And man, it's something that we go through every day at the TV station, just kind of talk them through why that makes sense. And so, I mean, nail on the head, Seth. Very well said.
Agree, Seth. I especially like the part about that guy. What's his name? Paul Schmidt. He said something very profound.
It was a profound statement. It really was.
Well, I mean, I know that, and this goes along with what Kiana brought up as well. It's just one of those things where figuring out where you are as a human and knowing what you want to do and where you want to play a role is really huge. And with that, by putting yourself forward in that regard of knowing where your target is, it's not like you put a door and shut off the rest of the world. There may be some other folks that want the style that you have provided other folks. I don't know how many folks that have been in the the small business world that have come up to me and be like, I know you typically work with nonprofit organizations, but would you do something for my business? And that's when I changed some of my verbiage that says I work with socially responsible small businesses as well. Mm-hmm. And so, but I also knew that I knew what the percentages were in that regard. And the simple fact is they enjoyed what I was doing, and they wanted us to tell that message. And so you're not really technically shopping, like I said, you're not shutting your door to a segment of the world that just can't get in, because you're putting yourself out there. You have a website, you have social media. You're not unpromoting yourself. You're just saying, well, this is what I do. This is how it can fit for you if this is where you want to go. But without compromising who you are, who your values are, which I thought was a really key point with what you brought up, because that's what sings to me, obviously, is, I'm a value and cause-based company. And so I thought that was really important to mention that. But yeah, I mean, if you know that there's organizations, because there's some nonprofit organizations that don't fit our world as well. So you have to play that, but like I said, it's not you sounding biased. It's you sounding like who you are and where you're trying to be. Yeah. And people want to be there too.
Yeah. And one thing I talked in each of the things I talked about the one target market. And honestly, quite often it comes up with, you do have maybe a primary and a couple of flanker markets. I didn't go into that because it's a little more complex, but you guys get the idea that you're always going to have a few of them on there. But designing for those, designing the messaging, designing your business around that really makes it different. If you can have one, that really makes it powerful. But most of us have primary and a couple of flankers.
Seth, another thing that you talked about that really resonates with me, and I'd love to hear from Paul and Chad as well, and maybe those in the audience if this resonates with you, and then Seth, if you want to elaborate on this. When you talked about that 80-20 and the 20% of people that cause you the most headaches, and you even brought up this idea of when you need to know when it's not a good fit. And I think as business owners, oftentimes that's something that we struggle with maybe early on, that we feel like we need to be everything for everyone. And that if someone comes to us or, if we need to make a client relationship work, when the reality is, I know I'll speak for myself. There have been times when I've said, to Paul, I didn't go into business to deal with this. This is not why I am doing this. And it could be for a number of reasons. It can be someone who just has unrealistic expectations, or it could be that it's just not a good fit. And so I really appreciated hearing you talk about that, because as we're finding our niche, it's so important to know who we are and who we want to do business with, because we do get to choose, and we don't, and trying to make ourselves be the right fit for someone as much as we want everyone to like us, that's not really the best approach to doing business.
Yeah. Yeah. So and you go at it from, your values, as Paul talked about, coming out from that, but also from just how much effort and how much profitability there is. Some people you're like, I like you as a person. I like what, but it's just there's not a good fit here. This is not a good fit between us. We've got to acknowledge that and make it. And trying to find one of the skills of being in business for a while is being better and quicker at spotting those mismatches before you invest too much into it. You become much more efficient by recognizing those mismatches and yellow flags showing up even in the first meeting you have with the client.
And that's also part of the growth process for business owners, because if you don't know and you get caught, you've learned, and learning from there allows you to spot those yellow flags even sooner before they become red flags. But at the same time, when you're starting out or when you're getting into a situation where you may not know, it's about the learning process, and we've all been there. But it's also, as Seth has said throughout this whole entire presentation, it is about narrowing and finding and targeting your niche. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time to really do that. And I think that you have to have some grace with yourself. It's good to go in, but there's going to be some nuances that are going to catch you off guard. And that's where your growth comes in. And I thought those were really good aspects that you brought up, Seth.
When you have a client like that, it's an expensive seminar.
It is.
I really liked what you said about the opportunity gap exploitation. I'm going to use that. I'm totally. It's so true. Like there are certain circumstances. I'm thinking like of a body shop customer of ours that kind of flipped the model. You think you bring your car to a mechanic, they kind of talk down to you. You expect it to be a little dirty in there and that kind of thing. And what this client did is just say, no, we're going to be friendly, clean. It's going to have, free sodas. It's going to have a nice waiting room with a big screen TV, and it's going to be spotless, and people are going to smile at you and treat you right and speak honestly to you and say, if we can fix it in 30 minutes or less, we're going to do it for free. And just like over the top customer service at a body shop. And he identified, there's a perception and there's this opportunity where I can kind of take market share by doing this. So I just thought of that example when you were talking about that. I'm like, man, that is right on target.
So Seth, do you have any other stories that would fit some of these aspects that you brought up, or that stick out that you didn't get a chance to fit in during your talk?
Oh, well, let me just play off of what Chad just said there. And that is the interesting thing with me. We've got two cars in our family, a Toyota and a Volkswagen. interestingly enough, I take him to 2 different shops. Okay. The one shop is very much like what you talked about. They are clean. They are awesome. I mean, they just go so much above and beyond that I love them as a company. Then I bought a Volkswagen, and I had a very frank conversation with them. I was like, I know you can work with this, but there just so happens to be right in my neighborhood another guy who has spent 40 years working on only Volkswagens. That's it. He will not touch any other car. I was like, I know you could do it, but I'm going to go with him for this car. And he's like, I understand. I get it. You know, it's two different ways of segmenting themselves. One guy said, I'm only going to touch one particular car, and I'm going to be so awesomely good at that one. He could diagnose those things like you wouldn't believe. I mean, 40 years working on one type of car versus the other guys, they're just so awesome. The guy that works on the Volkswagen, he's not clean. He's not the most, he's not, but it's okay because it's choosing the matchup. You get to choose what you want to do and what you want to be awesome at.
Such a great point. And okay, maybe to continue the pun, you know, we have to know when to stay in our lane as well, because I think sometimes, and I'm sure for some who are watching, you can relate to this. We try to do too much, and we might have expertise in a variety of areas, but as we spread ourselves too thin, trying to do a little bit of everything, or along the same lines, kind of turning that around as we try to work with maybe people that are not quite in that niche where we're really specialized and we know exactly what we're doing. And, you know, when everything just hums along, like that is our sweet spot. And when we start to pull ourselves out of that or stretch that zone, that's when things start to get dicey and we start to get uncomfortable, or it's easier to get those clients in with yellow flags right away.
Tempting too, very tempting.
It is, especially when we're talking about the financial side of our business. But Seth, as you pointed out, bringing in the wrong clients can be a very expensive headache. So what would you recommend for someone who, whether they're kind of, you know, breaking up with a client, maybe it's not the right fit, or they're being sought out by someone that is not, you know, just those yellow flags are already there and you know it's not going to be the right fit. How do you recommend having those conversations?
With a client that you have, that you need to, what I'm going to call fire the client, okay? Doing it very politely, but you do fire the client. Basically, you've got to have that very, very open, honest conversation and just say, look, you could say it's not you, it's me. You could translate, but it's just basically say, look, this is not a good situation. You can tell them the reasons, or just say, look, this is not working, so therefore we need to go a different direction. Let me tell you about 3 people in my industry that can probably work really well with you. There are 3 people that do a good job. I would suggest you talk with any one of them. You can do it in the most polite, friendly, but honest way of doing it, telling them what's going on, because even though you're effectively firing them, they walk away seeing that you're a person of integrity. That's really, really good, is to just lay that out there for them. And they get it. If they're in business, they can understand, look, this isn't the best situation. I may have had the conversation before with the client where it's just saying, due to the way this is working, this is just not profitable for us. We need to change it up. And you're not willing to pay more, so I think we need to shift it around. It happens that you have some of those conversations. So that's one. And then the other, when you're trying to, in that early intake, knowing your values and quantifying what things you spotted in past clients. See, when you have that seminar, Paul, that you mentioned, that seminar that you go to, you learn the lessons and you start identifying what are the common characteristics of those people. And you start to spot those in those early meetings. You start to see, and if you know your values, you start to spot where their values do not align. And sometimes when their values don't align with ours, how many of you are tempted to go ahead and go with it anyways because, hey, it's a bunch of extra revenue, and that's the name of the game, right? And it just comes back to bite you.
Yeah, those are hard lessons to learn, but you don't quickly forget those lessons.
Very true. Very true. Well, I think that's the end of our time here. I really appreciate it, Seth. This was great stuff. Great conversation. Great insight. And I was taking in a lot. So, so if anybody wants to get a hold of you directly, where should they go?
They can go to symposialabs.com website. They can go ahead and email me directly, Seth at Symposia Labs, really complex. And I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. I love talking with people on LinkedIn, and I do enjoy just having a virtual coffee, as we do right now these days, seems like virtual coffee over Zoom chat with people just to talk about what they're doing. Because one of the things that I personally love to do is I love having conversations with interesting people doing interesting things. So I enjoy those types of quick conversations no matter where it goes.
Well, you're interesting. You're doing interesting things. So I'm sure there's a lot of like-minded people who want to reach out to you. So, but yeah, just thanks again for your time and your insight. It was right on target. That's exactly what this group is intended for, to share these kind of best practices. And yeah, couldn't have been better. Thank you so much, Seth.
Good.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you so much for having me here.
No problem. And don't forget, stay tuned to the social platforms, as we will be having another one in a couple months. I know that we've had conversations about who that is, but you'll find.
Yeah, coming up in April, we are going to be talking about virtual events. Hopefully, maybe we'll even be talking about in-person events. We don't really know, unless you have a crystal ball. But we're going to be talking about virtual events and kind of some best practices, lessons learned over the last year. So looking forward to having that conversation coming up in April.
Awesome. But until then, you can always reach us at Lansing Marketing Hackers. You can reach Seth at Symposia Labs, and we appreciate you stopping in. And also, I know it's no sense in telling you that there's going to be a replay, because you're obviously going to be watching it now. But anyway, always catch us on YouTube and Facebook, all that stuff. Thank you again, Seth, and we will see you guys next time.